So I tell people, you know what? I could either be bitter or I could do better. And so I was like, you know what? I wanted to leave anyways, but I think this was just the universe closing that door so I could really focus on things that makes me happy and ways to make not only myself better, but those people who are coming besides and behind me.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Kristen Donnelly, one of the good doctors of Abbey Research. And at Abbey Research, we deeply believe in the fact that curiosity will change the world, because honestly, it's the only thing that ever has. We change our minds and how we see things through stories and relationships, not statistics or shaming or shouting. And the best way to start stories and relationships is with curiosity. This series is in service of that. It's called Welcome to My World, and I get to talk to people from all over the place who are different than me, which is literally everybody, about something in their lives that knowing it would make my life richer and yours too. None of us know how to human after all, so let's all figure it out together. Today's guest is no exception to this rule. I am joined by Genesis Amaris Kemp, who is a creative content writer, author, self-development advocate, visionary, inclusion and diversity enthusiast. I love the word enthusiast. Firecracker and a force to be reckoned with. And I can attest to that in the brief time we've known each other. She is a woman of color who said enough is enough and is now bolder than ever. She tried to remain silent, but that didn't work because no change occurred. This makes sense. Today, Genesis is readapting to the current times and making life-changing decisions. She's stepping out of her comfort zone by speaking up, challenging the status quo, and refusing to let limitations on her keep her down. I'm sure a lot of you resonate with that. I can't wait to talk to her about it. She is a trailblazer who wants others to live out their dreams, goals, and visions. If it takes her writing a book, which is called Chocolate Drop in Corporate America, From the Pit to the Palace, what a title, to accomplish these tasks, then so be it. She's been featured on 4 dozen podcasts and has recently started her own called Gems with Genesis Amaris Kemp. Genesis, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Kristen, as well as sharing and holding space. I'm super, super excited to unpack these wonderful nuggets.
My gosh, I'm so excited. There's so much in there, but I want to start off with the book. So what happened? Like, what led you? There's a lot of us. Oh, there it is, all pretty and real. A lot of us have, like, people who have written books, we all have the reason we wrote it down. So what made it get out of your head and onto a page?
Definitely a day of frustration in corporate America and the oil and gas and energy sector. Just being told that once an admin, always an admin, being told that, oh, just because you have your degree does not mean that you're going to go into a professional role. Being paid differently in comparison to my peers. Once I got into that professional role, there was a 20% pay gap, and it didn't come until 2020 after I spoke up in the vice president's meeting about racism that happened to me personally as well as professionally. And then the whole George Floyd thing kind of catapulted that discussion, because had that incident not happened, they probably wouldn't have got those of us that identify as Black or brown or minorities in a room to really ask, like, what are our thoughts about racism? Like, have we experienced it personally as well as professionally? So I say that all that to say, like, whenever you just go through, enough and you get sick and tired of going through the same old rhetoric, it forces you to do something different, because if nobody else is doing it, then you then become the solution to the problem at hand by sharing your story. And by sharing my story, it helped other people feel confident to start to either take that pen to paper and write their own book, which is what happened after author read mine, or they just get really bold and courageous and start having what I like to call courageous conversations.
And this is so fascinating, I think, because so many of us have hit a point where we're fed up with something, like enough is enough. And you're right, silence doesn't change anything, especially for women have often been programmed to remain silent.
Yeah.
And that it's just easier that way, but like nothing changes through silence. It just doesn't, it just can't, because people are not mind readers. And so we have to speak up to advocate for change for ourselves. So I'm curious though, did you remain in the corporate job since you've been doing this advocacy work, or did you move on to other pastures?
So I remained in the corporate job until February 2021 this year, because the way things kind of went down after my book came out, no one from the organization knew that my book came out for various reasons. So my book hit the market in May. Around that time frame, my dad got sick. And so, of course, it's still the pandemic. So I did not want to go back to work since I had, elderly parents. And my dad was then hospitalized from something as small as his blood sugar level being elevated. So then, whenever they started repatriating people back into the workforce, whenever the COVID cases went down and stuff, they called me and I said no, because my mother's still here, so I cannot take a risk, to go out and bring anything back home. So then there was a lot of back and forth with my supervisor and I. Then, fast forwarding, my father ends up passing away November 25th, 2020, the day before Thanksgiving. And then on December 1st, they called me and told me that I was going to be laid off. They laid off 1,900 people, and they told me, oh, yeah, we can't find another position for you throughout the company. And I was like, well, this kind of doesn't make sense. So I went and talked to the vice president again of my department, because I was like, I have a supply chain degree from a tier 1 university. I have double minors, one in purchasing and one in organizational leadership and supervision. And I work in global supply chain. So what do you mean there's not a role?
The biggest problem on the planet right now, besides COVID, is global supply chain management. So that just sounds like a pile of garbage.
Yes, exactly. So I tell people, you know what? I could either be bitter or I could do better. And so I was like, you know what? I wanted to leave anyways, but I think this was just the universe closing that door so I could really focus on things that makes me happy, and ways to make not only myself better, but those people who are coming besides and behind me. And so now I'm just, doing my book stuff, promoting it. I have a second edition of my book out on the market, where I went back and wrote about 2020, and I called it Far from Perfect Vision, but a Slap of Reality. That was the new chapter in the book. Then became a co-author for another book called Don't Let It Ruin the Life of Your Party, with this author out of Jamaica. She is phenomenal. Her name is Shanique MJ Davis. Then I did an anthology for COVID-19 stories. So just different things have just been coming into my pathway. And I was like, okay, universe, okay, Lord, Jesus, I see you.
I love that it's a great reminder. And this is a theme in a lot of my conversations in this series, is that when you make a decision, other pathways open up, that there's a, because every decision, we all need to remember this, there's an economy of decision making. Like when you decide one path, there are other doors that innately close. But we also need to remember that when you decide one path, other doors innately open as well. And that it's this, and it sounds like writing has become a real passion for you.
Yes, it's always been a passion, and I left it for some years. Back in high school, I was like a big time writer. I had like a few things published in the school magazines and stuff like that. Then, life happened. Like I started working, I started dating, then, married my husband now. And it's just been, when things happen, you kind of just put those things on the back burner, but you don't forget about them. But it's just like you get so consumed with other things that you forget to tap back into those gifts and talents that you have, until something hits you, and then you pull them out due to necessity. And it's like a way to cope. So that's how writing is for me. It's like a coping mechanism, but then it's also freeing, because as you're writing, you're unleashing those thoughts out of your head onto paper, and you could go back and reflect on what you wrote. And you're like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. We always say between Dr. Aaron and myself that you can't edit what's not on the paper. And so you need to, part of the process is editing. Part of it is always editing. So you got to get it all out. But sometimes you look at it and you're like, well, I was in a mood that day. And we've all seen the growth. I'm sure you feel the same way going back and looking at the first edition of your book to the second edition. You're like, oh, I wouldn't have said it this way that like now and things like that. It's writing is such an evolutionary process.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And then it's funny that you said that whenever you do go back and read it, you're like, man, I should have tweaked this in the second edition. But then you look at it and then you're like, maybe it'll hit differently for someone else that reads it.
That is such a good point. It was actually last night, as we talk in July, I was in a clubhouse room last night where somebody was saying that they didn't want to just have one story because it would get too redundant. And we were like, actually, you should have one story so that you don't overwhelm people, because every single time you tell the story, somebody different will hear it and somebody will hear it differently. Like it actually is never redundant because stories are living things, and books, even though they are written on dead trees, are also living things because words are living in our brains and living entities.
I like that. Yeah, that is so, so true, because somebody who needs what you have to say will pick up that moment. And I always call it those divine interventions and connections. And they're like, wow, I was looking for this. And you're like, it was there, but it wasn't until they needed it that they stumbled across it.
So true. So true. So changing the subject briefly from writing, even though I could talk about it forever. You mentioned in your bio and then in our conversation now that a piece of your life now is kind of bringing others alongside you or working with others. I'm assuming as a diversity and inclusion enthusiast that's a particularly big part of it. But what does that look like for you? What is supporting others look like?
So, one way I support others is allowing them to share their stories on the podcast, whether we have topics about ageism or wealth building, because there's various types of ways to build wealth, and then generational wealth. I've done a topic about with comfort kills media, because sometimes when you stay stuck in your comfort zone, it does kill you over time. Then, of course, my diversity, equity, and inclusion is what I'm passionate about. But let's not forget about equality. And that starts by bringing everyone together and just really listening to their stories, seeing why they think the way they think, seeing if we could unpack that and look for ways that we share commonalities versus the differences and build upon the commonalities versus the differences. And why it's so passionate for me is because I'm multicultural. So I'm first generation American. My mom is Caribbean and my dad was South American. And so in within that, if you break it down a little further, my sister's kids are half white, my brother's kids are half Indian. My other brother, his daughter is African, so her mother's Cameroonian. So we have, like, I tell people, like, the United Nations as part of our family, and we're like a melting pot. There's all shades, all colors, all sizes. And I tell people it's really cool because you get to learn other cultures from your own family members, and you get to understand, okay, why do they say what they say? Why do they think what they think? Why do they believe what they believe? And have you not, if you don't have that privilege to really assimilate with yourself with someone that's different than you, then you're missing out.
That's so true. I mean, I love everything. First of all, I love the United Nations at a family reunion visual. That's like the best thing. I think that's amazing. But I also absolutely, and even with the multiculturalism in terms of ethnicity and mother country and race, but like even within that, I'm sure you've got people that love baseball or love reading or are big knitters or believe in, farming all their vegetables. Like there's even beyond that such rich diversity within your family that, like, learning how to listen well, I'm sure just deepens your humanity in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, it does. And it was hard at first, especially um, because sometimes the Caribbean culture could be so strong, but so can the
Oh, okay.
South American culture. But just maintaining your boundaries, because I tell everyone, whenever you are bringing cultures together, if someone says something that you really don't agree with and they try to force it on you, you could respectfully disagree. while still maintaining your peace and protecting your boundaries. And then whenever you guys could really have those level-headed conversations, or like I say, courageous conversations, then you can move forward. So I tell people, what am I doing now? I do coaching. So anyone who's interested in learning more about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I share it from my lens, of course, while partnering it with my 15 years of experience in corporate America. 12 of those years was in oil and gas. And then, of course, the last 7.5 years was working for a Fortune 500 mogul. So definitely been around the block
Like
and
you've been
started.
in the trenches.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it's eye opening, and I just tell people, like, I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I have. They weren't always easy and they were hard, but it's in those hard seasons of life that really make you appreciate the light at the end of the tunnel. And once you like graduate out of that season, because now you actually have some power that you could spit out there to help people who are still in that situation, who are looking to get out. And I tell people, you can't really relate to somebody if you haven't been through what they're going through.
Mm. So I love all of that. Such rich wisdom there. Before I go, I want to ask, because before we go, there is I'm just going to leave you here. Just kidding. In the bio, you capitalize the title of your podcast, GEMS. And I'm curious, is that an acronym for something?
No, it's
Okay.
just I wanted to really capitalize gems because I believe that we all have gems that we are sharing.
Mm.
So I was like, it's so important that we share those gems now and be present with it, because if not, and we continue to hold on to those precious diamonds and rubies and the pressures that we went through, then we're not really helping somebody break free. We're not helping them rise above their limitations. We're not helping them, break down barriers. We're not helping them walk into their divine purpose and calling, because each one of us have been placed on this earth for various reasons. But if you don't know who you are and why you're here, then you're missing something. And you don't, that time that you're missing it, you're not going to get that time back. So I tell people, don't wait till, you're in a hospital bed or you can't do all the things you wanted to do to, get down on yourself. Do it now. And sometimes you have to do it afraid. And sometimes you have to take that leap of faith in order to unlock those doors of endless opportunities. Because if not, your dreams and your visions are going to end up in the graveyard. And I said, whenever, I went to the cemetery to bury my dad, I was like, wow, I looked at all the tombstones and headstones there. And I was like, I wonder if every person here lived out their dream to the fullest.
It's a stark reminder that we only get a few trips around the sun. And I didn't get a chance to say it before, so please, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. I can't fathom that, and I'm very, very sorry. Thank you for sharing that with us. You didn't need to. Um, I'm grateful that grief has animated you into service, and that we can all learn from you as you teach us so much, even just in this little bit. I'm so excited already to go back and listen to some things. I'm mindful of the time, so I want to give you an opportunity, though, to share some more gems with our folks. Is there any parting words you'd like to leave the audience with?
Sure, I'll read a quote from the book. So, the one quote that I would like to leave the listeners with, as well as the viewers, is: stop waiting for someone to co sign your dreams. Start running with passion. In time, the right people who genuinely care and want to support you will fall into place. And the reason why I chose that quote is because we have to stop waiting on people to validate who we are and what we can become. Because if you keep waiting for man or woman's approval, you'll die by their rejection, because the vision was placed inside of you, it wasn't placed inside of them. So they may not necessarily understand why you want to start the business you want to start, why you have the vision you have, why you want to start the nonprofit, or why you are out here trying to achieve certain things, because they don't don't understand, and that's okay. But just think about it this way: when we are cruising at new altitudes on the plane, they tell you that you have to be mindful of the load that you pack in your luggage because they don't want to weigh the plane down. Because if the plane is weighed down, it's not going to be able to successfully cruise to those higher altitudes to get you to your destination safely. So in life, you have to get rid of, unwanted baggage in order for you to soar high and be the eagle that you're destined to be. And it's no disrespect or discharge to the people that you're saying no to or the ones that you're pulling away from. You could respectfully love them, but you could love them from the balcony, because when you get ready to walk into new levels, new dimensions, and unlock destiny doors, if they don't have the same vision that you have, there's going to be conflict. So you cannot allow that conflict to deter you from reaching your ultimate destination.
So true. Well, that's a fantastic place to hit pause on this conversation, because I certainly hope you guys all follow Genesis across her various socials and pick up her book and all of her future books. If you've loved this conversation, please give it a thumbs up on the YouTube. The algorithm really loves that. And if you loved the vibe of the conversation, I have a lot like this. So please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing. Not only conversations here on the Welcome to My World series, but conversations that Dr. Erin and I have about how to build empathy through essentially in watching culture. So as you're watching this right now, something else that's airing on our channel is our analysis of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and what we can learn about empathy in watching Marvel shows. So definitely don't miss that. If you're a Marvel fan like we are, you can see my Funkos. We would love to have you join us across the channels. Again, I want to thank my incredible guest, Genesis Amaris Kemp. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Dr. Kristen, for having me on and just going deep diving with me.
I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. This has been Welcome to My World. I'm Dr. Kristen Donnelly. My guest was Genesis Amaris Kemp. You can find all of her contact information in the show notes below, and I will see you all next time on Welcome to My World. Bye.